Metro 2033 Redux is one of the most iconic games of the entire series, with beautiful graphics, amazing gameplay mechanics, and a really engaging storyline. However, the game is not perfect, and there are several core issues and things that you must know about before you buy it. But in case you have never seen the game before, it is a first-person shooter set in a post-apocalyptic world that is completely in ruins after a devastating nuclear war. You play as a young man who is born and raised in the Metro that has become humanity's last refuge. Your goal is therefore to navigate the dangerous world, survive against all odds, and uncover the secrets that could change the fate of the survivors. But when it comes to the main gameplay, it is all about exploring the dangerous and atmospheric tunnels of the Moscow Metro. You must engage in both stealth and combat, but also manage very limited resources. Now, this gameplay can play out in many different ways. For instance, you might enter a dark abandoned metro station completely filled with enemies. You must then choose if you want to go in guns blazing or go for a more stealthy approach, where you must silently take down the enemies or avoid them altogether. Now, when you first start out, you'll deal with quite basic mechanics, but then get more complex tools and challenges as you progress. So in the early game, you must focus on the essentials of shooting, using medkits, and just overall surviving in the environment. But as you then advance throughout the game, you will need to learn and master many types of weapons, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. This could be a shotgun that is really powerful in close quarters, or an assault rifle that is way better for range and rate of fire. Additionally, you will also need to manage your gas mask filters when exploring very toxic areas above ground. And that brings me to one of the most important mechanics, the resource management. So everything in the game, your ammo, your health kits, and your gas mask filters are all in very short supply, and you must be very strategic about your use of them. For example, bullets are not just for shooting, they also serve as the game's currency, so you must decide on the best way to spend them. Do you shoot something, or do you buy a better upgrade later on? This system creates a ton of tension, as every decision can have significant consequences for your survival, and it is this emphasis on scarcity and resourcefulness that makes every encounter feel quite meaningful and every victory hard-earned. And that brings me to my next point, the game's progression system, and it's quite heavily tied into the story, but also the challenges you will face throughout the entire game. Now, as you already mentioned, the early game is quite straightforward, where you learn the basics of survival, combat, and resource management, but as you progress, you get introduced to way more dangerous enemies, complex environments, and you must also make tougher decisions with the storyline. And this story is a massive part of the game. It is the main driving factor that will take you from one location to another, as you must save your home station, but also humanity overall. Most other games like this would have an overworld structure, but this one does not. Instead, it follows a linear path with a series of interconnected levels. Now, these levels will vary a lot in terms of size and scope, anywhere from cramped, claustrophobic tunnels to way larger and more open areas. But what these levels have in common is how they enhance this storyline, where the environmental storytelling is a massive role. This narrative is really compelling. It's filled with very dark themes and moral dilemmas that add a ton of depth to the overall gameplay. So as you can probably imagine, exploration is a massive part of the game, as it often really pays off in terms of finding valuable items or learning more about the story. Now, as you approach the end game, the stakes are way higher. You have more intense combat encounters and tougher environments to navigate. The story will also ramp up, leading to a climax that will depend on the choices you made throughout the entire game. And this progression from early to mid and even end game is smooth but also quite challenging. Now, I want to dive way deeper into some of the most unique but also best features of the game. And the first one has to be the atmosphere. This game is hauntingly atmospheric, where the world displays remnants of humanity that are forced to live underground. And you can tell that a ton of detail and time went into making this world feel real and lifelike. This could be the dimly lit tunnels, the constant sense of claustrophobia, and the sound of distant creatures that all really contribute to an environment that feels hostile and captivating. Another standout feature has to be the resource management. So unlike many other shooters where ammunition is abundant, this game really forces you to carefully manage your resources, adding a really good layer of strategy to the gameplay, where you must constantly weigh the risk and rewards of engaging in combat or saving your precious supplies. Furthermore, the game offers a very unique moral choice system that will influence the game's narrative. So throughout the entire game, you'll encounter situations where your actions can have moral implications. This could be choosing to help a fellow survivor or save the supplies for yourself. Now, as you can probably imagine with all these gameplay mechanics, this game might be quite hard. And that brings me to my next point, the game's difficulty. And I would definitely not call it an easy game, as it won't hold your hand at all. It really expects you to learn from trial and error. So when you first start out, the game can be quite daunting, as it will throw you into situations where your resources are scarce and enemies can be quite overwhelming. Now, the game does offer many difficulty settings, anywhere from easy to hard, where the harder modes are significantly more challenging. The enemies are more aggressive and resources are even more scarce. So if you're a bit more casual player and you just want to enjoy the story with a bit less focus on the overall survival mechanics, the easier game modes are quite nice. weapons, as you have more ammo and less punishing gameplay. However, if you're looking for the true experience, the harder difficulties is the way to go. It will further emphasize the resource management and the stealth mechanics. So the game is overall quite flexible in difficulty and game modes. However, if Minecraft is the only other game you ever played, this one might be quite tough for you. Now let's talk about the game's graphics, sound and atmosphere. And as you can probably tell, the graphics are quite good, but even better yet, it really creates a deeply immersive atmosphere that is dark with gritty visuals that perfectly captures this post-apocalyptic world. And if you're a nerd like me, you'll notice the lighting effects are particularly effective, creating a real sense of claustrophobia, but also contrasting with a harsh, irradiated surface. This all adds up to an environment that feels lived in and real, anywhere from the crumbling underground station to the very desolate ruins above ground. The sound design is also massive, as it really creates a ton of tension and immersion. This could be every creak, every distant growl, but also echoing footsteps that all add a ton to the feeling of dread as you explore a very dangerous world. Then on top of it, you add the music that is quite subtle but impactful, with quite eerie tracks that intensify during combat or really adding to moments of suspense. So together, the graphics, the sound effects and music create a very haunting atmosphere that really pulls you into the game world. Now with that being said, the game is not perfect, and there are several pros and cons that we must cover. The first pro has to be the engaging storyline. The narrative is so compelling, with moral choices that will subtly influence the outcome of the game, really adding a ton of depth to the gameplay. The next pro has to be the challenging gameplay. If you're looking for a game that will really challenge you with a tough survival-focused experience, this might be the game for you, and will offer a good mix of resource management, stealth and combat, requiring a ton of strategic thinking and careful planning. And the final pro has to be the really immersive atmosphere. The game's detailed graphics, the sound design and eerie music create a really powerful atmosphere that really pulls you into the game world, where every experience feels real and tense. And now for the cons. The first con is the linear progression, and while it isn't a con per se, it's something I really want to bring to focus for you, as many other games like this are open world. This one is quite linear, with a structure that feels more restrictive with a set path. Now it is very enjoyable, but it does also limit your freedom to explore. And the other con is the limited replayability. So while the story and moral choices add some replay value, the overall linear nature of the game makes it quite limited in terms of replayability for most, as it won't offer a ton of variety, and for majority of players, a single playthrough will be enough. Now with that being said, let's grade the game. And Metro 2033 Redux gets a solid 8 out of 10, and for several reasons. First is an incredibly deep and atmospheric experience that is both challenging but also engaging, where the game world is incredibly detailed with stunning graphics and sound design that really brings the game world to life. Then on top of it, you add the really compelling storyline with moral choices that add to the overall depth and replayability. The survival mechanics are also fantastic, including resource management and stealth, where you must always be aware of your resources and surroundings. However, the game has several drawbacks. The linear progression will be a con for some players, so while the linear nature of the game is quite well executed, it can also feel quite restrictive if you prefer more freedom to explore. Now, should you buy the game? Well, if you're a fan of survival horror and post-apocalyptic games, it is very likely worth it for you, as the game has really strong atmosphere, challenging gameplay, and a really engaging storyline that really makes it stand out in the genre. For more amazing games, click here.